So that thing is kind of like the sumo. Snow Bros, or Snow Bros Nick and Tom, is a 1990 arcade platformer. And before any of you fucks want to call this a Mario Brothers ripoff, I would personally describe the game as Bubble Bobble and Mario Brothers. See, as a wee lad, I never really went to an authentic arcade. I mean, obviously not one from the 90s, so my first arcade experiences were actually playing on this Pac-Man plug-and-play and playing Mario Brothers for the Game Boy Advance on my DS. So keep that in mind before any arcade gamer elitists leave me death threats and shit. But then my dad bought this arcade stick. A very similar experience with the Pac-Man plug-and-play, except it was probably mass-produced in a sweatshop without any licensing whatsoever. You laugh about these Temu-ass products all you want, but I actually have pretty fond memories playing on this thing during 2020. I mean, with so much free time, I couldn't really think of anything better to do than just go through every single game. And would you know, this is how I found out about they go from being snowmen to elephant gremlins. How did it get like this? To figure that out, I started playing every game of the franchise up to that point. Snow Bros was distributed by a company called Romstar in North America and Europe. Fun fact, if you squint your eyes really hard, it looks like it says porn star. You play as two brothers that are connected to the title of the game, and your goal is saving two princesses. Depending on the version of the game you're playing, the name of the princesses are different, as well as the main villain. The princesses were Putty Putty and Poochie Poochie, while the villain was named King Atchich. When the game became localized, their names changed to Terry and Tina and King Scorch. In-game, it doesn't actually give you any context of the entire setting, which is Snowland, if you were wondering. But of course the game would rather explain how the power-ups work, because, you know, it's not like you're gonna figure that out by playing the damn game yourself anyways. The red bottle of potion gives you speed, the blue bottle gives you a power shot, which speeds up the whole snowball making process. I think this is the most important power-up to get, because without it, you can get cornered and killed by other enemies really quick. The yellow bottle just gives you a longer range, and I honestly don't really care about this one too much, but I'd rather have it than not. I mean, that's at least what you'd want from a power-up. And lastly, there's the rarer green bottle. It inflates you like a balloon, and you can float around the entire screen and kill any enemy you want. I think the best thing about these power-ups is that you can actually stack all of them if you want, as long as you don't die. But at certain times, it actually makes you feel like a badass little snowman. I would describe most of the enemies as just silly little guys. I mean, look at these pink looking goblins and their shit-eating grins. These are called Titchies. These green guys are called Bochins, and they're frogs that shoot fire from their mouths. At around stage 3, they start shooting down, and that's basically all they do. And these blue guys are called Komotaros, and I thought they were like ninjas, but I guess they're just little balls of blue hair. They do this Ninjago Spinjitzu looking attack, and once they get it started, they're coming straight towards you. These guys are called Budoros. At first I thought they were like yellow monkeys, but they're not. These sumo wrestlers are pretty hard to kill, although when the other enemies are dead, they automatically disappear. So I guess in a way, they kind of are the easiest enemy to get rid of, because you don't actually have to touch them to get rid of them. But you gotta make sure you watch out for their fireballs. The Pumpkinhead is by far the coolest looking enemy, but it's probably the most annoying one too. They're invincible and only show up when you have like one enemy left on screen and you can't kill it. This is a common trope in arcade platformers, I think, but I actually really like this addition. It's a good way to keep the challenge afloat even though there is one more enemy left. But sometimes they can appear sooner, which, you know, comes off a little bit more annoying. And when they spawn these slime ghosts, they just clip through walls, and at that point, you might as well just call it quits. These white Budoros are called Serados. They throw bombs at you. They're not too bad though. This art makes them kind of look like Glenn Quagmire.
If I see that nigga in real life, nigga, my eyes motherfucking pop out. That nigga chick crazy. It's your house, nigga. What you mean, who that is?
Giggity, giggity, go!
These other pink guys are called Bottoms, and they're just like Titchies, except they ram into you, and they appear later in the game. These charging chuck little fucks can get on my nerves sometimes. These bats also appear later in the game, and once you fall through this pit, you can fall through the top and nab them pretty quick. At first I was scared because you know, when you see a pit, that means death. But after realizing it's used like that, I actually really liked it. Since I'm on a mind reading streak, I know exactly what you're thinking right now. Gee, sounds like a lot of crazy enemies. How do you kill them? You shoot them or something?
I didn't ask that.
Yes, you did! You submerge them into giant snowballs and then use them to knock out the other enemies. As brutal as it sounds to be, you know, eaten alive by snow, this is actually the most fun part of the game. There's just something really satisfying about seeing how many enemies you can kill with 1 or 2 balls. The only thing about the game I don't like is that you can't hop down from ledges, you have to slowly walk all the way down. Stages 26 and 28 were probably the most annoying. You can't jump up these platforms, at least that I know of, so I basically waited for these little twats to crawl down, while avoiding fireballs too. The bosses can be pretty fair, but let me tell you, these Garden of Banban looking ass fellas were really testing my goddamn patience. They fly down while dropping eggs, and then you have to use their babies to turn them into snow, so then you can hit 2 big birds 3 to 4 times each. That might not sound bad, but having to keep track of these baby bird enemies all at once, moving about on every platform you can jump on, while also making sure you don't get hit by the bosses, it's not as fun as it sounds. Especially when you have 1-hit deaths, 3 lives, and every time you use a fucking continue, it resets the whole fight. This boss is definitely the quarter hog, because unless you have unlimited credits, you're basically fucked. And I think it's weird because after that, you fight these Shrek Wazowski fellas, and they're not even hard at all. Now the last boss, that has a bit going on. They spit out these bubbles that either have balls that explode into fire, enemies, or a power-up. If they're empty, that's the worst because they can suck you in, and you have to try to burst your way out before you die. Once the bubbles hit the top, then the bubbles pop. And after they do, if there's an enemy on the ground, then you have to use it to turn into snow and hit the bosses on each side. You have to constantly predict where things are going to land. And this boss fight really would not be that bad if it weren't for the fact that every time you get hit, you die. It's a little insane and difficult, but I think that's honestly what makes it a well-crafted boss fight. Like it was made by a mad genius or something. I recommend playing this game with an actual arcade stick with buttons if you own one, because I had to use my Xbox 360 controller like this to mash the buttons. I know it's not a real fucking controller, okay? Leave me alone. And as for actually fighting this boss for itself, the best piece of advice I can give is use any power-ups the bubbles give you, because having at least 1 power-up can make this whole boss fight actually beatable. Even though Bubble Rock here is the last boss, the character who supposedly kidnapped the princesses doesn't even appear in the game. At least I didn't find him. When you beat the last boss, you see a rising red sun, and everybody dances as the game tells you, "Thank you. Game end." Don't mind me, I'm just putting in my high score. The game's full title always seemed to be Snow Bros, Nick and Tom, but when it came out on the NES, it was just Snow Brothers. The Famicom version was called Snow Bros, and the Nick and Tom appears in like a spiky bubble on the corner. I think that's actually better looking than having it intertwined with the actual title. Oh yeah, and the Famicom version also had this promotional video thing. It starts with an exposition shot of this log cabin, and this Japanese girl is playing Snow Bros on her Famicom. The whole point of this was to explain how the game plays, and it wasn't a commercial or even a part of any VHS promo. It was a video that they premiered at Famicom related events, according to the description of this upload I found on YouTube. Anybody remember that Blank Room Soup video? That's what this reminds me of a little bit. The Famicom cover art is just the same as what you would see in the title screen, and that makes sense, but the US cover art has a lot more going on. It's not entirely accurate to the game's design, but man, if that doesn't scream 90s American video game art, then I don't know what does. If you planned on collecting any of those console ports, well, good luck, because each one is expensive as fuck for some reason. There's an intro scene that starts with, "For many years, King Scorch has plotted to take over the world, but he knew that his armies could not defeat Prince Nick and Prince Tom of Whiteland." And apparently these guys were human, which is kind of confusing because didn't Nick and Tom have like snow powers because they were, you know, snowmen? I don't think the arcade game made any mention of how they were able to turn enemies into snow, so who knows? Maybe being turned into snowmen nerfs their god powers. Oh, and if the bad guy's name is King Scorch, then why doesn't he just fucking melt these guys after turning them into snow? Instead, he decides to, like, you know, capture their girlfriends, because I suppose that's more important. I know this is probably thinking too deep for like like a video game story, but come on, I need more context as to why he needs the princesses because, oh wait a minute, I can just read the manual. Read the story screens to find out how Wicked King Scorch trapped Nick and Tom and kidnapped the Frost Princesses. Of course, because I love reading these fucking text boxes that take so goddamn long to load. This manual gives all the enemies new localized names, and they're just shit like Chili, Icy, Shiver, Igloo. Pumpkinhead actually retains its name though, which is probably because of the fact that this is the only English sounding name of all the characters from the original release. I think the weirdest changes they made is the fact that Bochins are now called Flowfrog 1, and Budorus are called Froggers. Way to fuck up the whole theming, I guess. My personal favorite change though, is the fact that Saradas are renamed to fridges. Yeah, you know the fridges? They threw bombs and shit. The manual also calls the power-ups hot sauce, and they must have thought that was funny or something. The red hot sauce apparently gives you speed skates, like this is some fucking Run 2 game or some shit. I think they also messed up on the colors now that I read it, because it says green gives you a long range ability, which, you know, should be yellow, but the only way I'm gonna find that one out is to ditch this digital piece of fucking trash and play the actual game. As crazy as it sounds, the gameplay feels exactly like an NES version of the arcade game, and it doesn't do a bad job. The NES graphics have a more simplistic style, you know, I mean obviously, but I kind of like how clean and vibrant it feels compared to the original game. And would you look at that, they done fucked up the power-ups, just what I thought. Getting extra lives is also kind of easier in this port, but it's also not that much easier. In the arcade game, you had to collect all of these letters for 1 life, but in this version, all you gotta do is play a slot machine. It's easier because all you do is fucking press a button and, you know, hope you win, but that's the thing, you gotta hope you win. And the NES game does not have any continues, so if you're bad at this game, then you might want to bust out a Game Genie or something. After I beat the first boss, the game says, "Congratulations, let's go stage 11. There was this part right here I actually couldn't get out of, and the pumpkin enemies spawned, so you know what that means, leaving me in a moment in fear trying to get away from this ghost. The bosses in the game, in my opinion, are way easier than the arcade ports, but that's probably because the NES is weaker hardware. They basically neutered each boss fight. The second boss doesn't even have its dramatic entrance, and the third boss looks more stiff. And you only have to fight like half of the fourth boss, which probably has like the funniest death out of all of them. Now for Bubble Rock, well, for starters, the princess's placement actually makes more sense. I thought it was kind of weird how in the arcade game that they were all tied up at the top, but like, you know, that's where you get killed if you touch it. I didn't want to mention it because it seemed like a very weird minor nitpick, but now that the NES port actually corrects it, I got a little excuse. Oh, and the pacing actually feels a little bit less chaotic compared to the arcade version. The Genesis port was Japanese only when it came out, which sucked for the rest of us, because the game has actual real significant improvements. For starters, the intro isn't the wall of text that takes a million fucking years to read. The Genesis port actually gives you everything you need to know with animated visuals. No bullshit. And just despite the NES port, the Genesis manual actually gives you a fucking backstory. I think. I mean, I can't really read Japanese, but I'd like to imagine that it does. Oh, and you're also just snowmen by default. Wait a minute, that just made me realize, did they even turn back into humans from the NES game? No. The Genesis port is much more like the arcade game. Gee, I wonder why. But it also does have its differences. Instead of collecting letters or gambling for more lives, you have this simple password system, making this game way more reasonable to play. Other than that, it's basically no different than any of the other games. Until you get to the final boss. Just when Nick and Tom are about to get back with their girlfriends, they end up getting kidnapped too, leaving the player to now take the role as one of the princesses to save Nick and Tom. That's actually really cool. I'm just gonna say it, this is without a doubt the best way to play Snow Bros if you ever do plan on playing the game. I mean, the other games are good for what they are, but it's hard to really compare them to this game when this game actually adds like beneficial and bonus content. I will say this game does have an unfair advantage because it did come out later than the NES port. But hey, what better excuse to introduce new enemies? Like these sheet ghosts that have silly little faces. They don't really do much. And there's these red birds that have a kick attack that shoot a projectile. Then, when you get into space, there's these really fast robot dudes and cannons that shoot out these balls like the second boss. The first new boss is a really weird freaky gremlin that spawns little gremlin babies from the sky. It's actually a really hard boss, but thankfully this game has that sweet fucking password system, so you don't need to replay the entire game if you die at this point. The second new boss is actually King Atchich himself. He has a specific attack pattern, and once you know where to go, it's not that bad of a fight. Both console ports are good for what they are. The NES is fun for being a more bullshitty kind of experience. I mean, the extra life system works, and if you know how to play the game, then you can get to the ending, probably without a problem. The Genesis port feels a lot more closer to the arcade game, and it changes the ending in a really interesting way that also adds more content and makes it the best single player experience. But it isn't the first single player experience. Ah yes, the only way to play Snow Bros in a public bathroom. Oh wait. Snow Bros Jr. by its name sounds like a Baby Mario-ass spin-off or something, but no, this is literally the NES game just for Game Boy. But this time, you're trying to save one of the Snow Brothers instead of the Snow Princesses, you know, so they didn't have to make this multiplayer. If this is the only version of Snow Brothers you had, it's fine. But compared to the rest of the games, it's obvious it doesn't really stand a chance. I'll give the game some credit. It was the first to have the password among the rest of the games. Credit given. There's also a bonus screen that really reminds me of the Mario Land 2 6 golden coins bonus screen. I'm pretty sure they just ripped that shit off or something. The next actual arcade entry was called Snow Bros 2 with new elves. What does that mean? I don't recall any old elves. Well, that's what they called it in the West, because in Japan it was just Snow Bros 2 Otenki Paradise. The story is actually a direct continuation from the last game. King Atchich's little brother wants to resurrect him, but in order to do that, he kidnaps the Princess of Weatherland. So I guess this is a new princess? And it's up to the 4 main characters to save her. In Japan, all of the characters have nice illustrations for their designs. In the West, we had Nightmare Fuel. Tom wasn't left out of the game, he's just Nick's alternative skin when you do multiplayer. But let's be real, who wants to hear about these little bastards when there's new characters? Hello? Bobby is the Prince of Lightning, so he's able to turn enemies into balls of lightning. At first I thought it was gonna be like, oh, so each character just plays the same. No, Bobby can actually carry the balls of lightning and you can like aim them at other enemies. That's really cool. Roy is the Prince of Rainland, and he turns enemies into streams of water. His attack has slight Minecraft water physics, which is pretty neat, but his death animation is kind of traumatizing, and so is Bobby's. Whoa. Richard comes from Breezeland, and he turns the enemies into these gusts of wind? I don't really get that, but hear me out. He can swallow them, and he turns into like a big fucking Kirby ball. Because of that, I gotta make this my favorite character. Why does he look like Captain Spaulding?
I'll tell you what, Ski King. Why don't you just take your mama home some chicken, and then I won't have to stuff my boot all up in your ass.
The graphics in this game look more polished, whereas in the last arcade game, they felt a little bit either dull or like bizarre and dull. Like I couldn't tell if half the time I was in an actual place or if this was like a drug trip. Here, the structures look more clean and they have some weirdness, but not as abstract as like the fucking last game. It plays just about as the same as the arcade game, but with fun additions like falling platforms, and you can swap between characters after a game over after putting in, you know, some more of those infinite credits. After the second boss, there's a time limit mission, and it feels so refreshing to play that after playing like 150 plus of these fucking levels. Don't get me wrong, it's actually a really fun gameplay loop. The console ports replicate the arcade levels, so not only was I playing 50 of the same goddamn levels, but I was playing 50 of the same goddamn levels 3 times. Look at this jump scare right here.
Well, Cuphead and his pal.
By World 5, there's portal mechanics, and that's pretty cool, but I mean, that's not much different than like the falling through the roof and the floor thing from the first game, so it didn't really blow my mind that much. But if they used it more throughout the game, I feel like they could have expanded the levels design. Instead, they just probably thought of this by World 5 and was just like, oh, well, put that in the game. The only bullshit moment that occurred to me was I got stuck in this spot and I had to basically let myself get eaten by this fiery pit. But other than that, I was able to actually beat this game twice without really any bullshit moments. The same power-ups are back again, but instead of being hot sauce and potions, they're like cocktail beverages. And when they appear, some of them actually flash like a Mario Kart item box, and that really does add to the arcadey experience. And there's also a trophy power-up, but it's basically the same as like the green potion from the first game. The enemies in this game look a lot different, but functionally, most of them are just the same as previous enemies from the last game. Some of them are different, like these big fat purple guys who just get really big and fall on you. I think where this game actually shines the most at is the boss fights. These are probably the most unforgettable bosses in the entire series. The first one is a slot machine, and I mean, this design looks really fucking badass. Oh, and there's a health bar now? That's cool as hell. After you beat a boss, it plays a cutscene to the next location, and after the first one, the princess gets kidnapped by... Actually, let's pause for a second. Here's a little pop quiz. What do you think the princess gets kidnapped by? A, a gorilla. B, a random little enemy. C, a train. Or D, a shark with 2 legs. Well, if you answered C, then you were correct. Although, once you get into the fight, it's revealed it's a train with a face who fires dick-shaped nose missiles at you. That is incredible. The next boss is much less annoying than those 2 fucking birds from the last game. I think the boss does raise the challenge up, but with the level being designed how it is, using these little bastards to hit the bosses feels a lot less of a struggle and more natural because of the level's layout. And when the chameleons die and turn into angels, they look like the fucking duck from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared.
When you meet a businessman.
Oh, and just when you thought that second boss was weird, well, the next boss is a giant rabbit that has these Elvis looking dudes, and it's being carried by these other guys, and while you're fighting the boss, the rabbit shakes his ass throughout the boss fight. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like a taunt towards the player, but that is crazy. The final boss is the little brother sitting on a sun face, and even here, the last boss is less chaotic compared to the other game. And I know I bring up the last game a lot, but that should really show how much they've improved. I played this game twice because it's that good. I can see maybe some people having a problem with how easy the game is, and by how easy the game is, the only difference is you don't have to restart the boss fight when you die, you can pick up where you left off at, but honestly, I didn't have a problem with that, but if you do, I can get it. This game is honestly a great arcade game, and it's really a great thing that now you can play it on modern consoles and PC, because back when it came out right before Toaplan shut down its operations, which would then of course cease all Snow Bros projects until about like 3 decades later. But what happened? Street Fighter 2 fucking killed it. When the demand for fighting games spiked in arcades thanks to, you know, nobody in the arcade business apparently wanted to do anything with these old school little arcade platformers. If only somebody could go back in time and tell the developers of Snow Bros 2 to turn it into a 2D fighting game where every character is buff as shit. But unfortunately, the fate of Snow Brothers was just being locked away in a file cabinet that's in a safe vault and buried underground somewhere for 28 years. If you look up what the third Snow Bros game is, you'll most likely find Snow Bros Wonderland, but that wasn't always the case. Remember when I mentioned how I discovered these games on that arcade controller? Well, it had the first 2 Snow Bros games, as well as this. You're gonna be hooked on the brothers with this one.
Yo, you're in for a treat, so hang on to your seat.
Snow Brothers 3 Magical Adventure, also known as Snow Brothers 3 Prehistoric Adventure, also known as Ball Boy, wait, what? What? Is a bootleg hack of Snow Bros. And for the longest time, I thought this shit was the real Snow Bros 3. This game was stolen by a company called Searmex, and I can't find any information if this company is still active, so the fact that this company potentially could be still alive while the company that they ripped off of died is genuine insanity. Even though this game is more of, the first game, just with a different coat of shitty paint, when you jump into Snow Brothers 3, The Magical Adventure, it's really annoying because sometimes there's a weird delay every time you try to jump off of a platform. And oh yeah, you're turning your enemies into soccer balls, by the way. I don't know, I guess it makes more fucking sense apparently.
Surprise, Daddy! We're in Pakistan! I thought we could go sow some soccer balls together!
Actually, forget about the soccer balls. Why does this game take place in real life pictures where you're fighting against dinosaurs and Jason Voorhees? Oh, the developers were on a real magical adventure coming up with that shit. Oh, fuck, that's the fucking pumpkin. That's the pumpkin. Why does he look like that fucking thing from that movie, the Boogeyman movie? Even with all the effort that they put into ripping off Snow Bros 1, they couldn't even replicate the transitions for some reason. How lazy. It's hard to even consider this a fair ripoff too, because the difficulty got spiked really bad, probably so they could sucker as many quarters at you as they can. There used to be one long-range enemy per, screen, but now there's two kinds of long-range enemies, so now you gotta worry about other enemies throwing shit at you. And yeah, this also includes the Jason Voorhees enemy throwing his hockey mask. Not only that, but remember that sumo wrestler enemy that you can't really kill and you have to kill all the other enemies to get rid of? Now don't quote me exactly, but I swear that motherfucker only showed up 4 to 6 levels of the 50 at most. In Snow Bros 3, the same thing shows up every other fucking stage. The second boss's background has a gargoyle skeleton. There are so many fucking skulls for some reason. In the third boss, you fight 2 cacodemons from Doom. Imagine you're playing Doom and instead of, these guys spilling their guts out after you kill them, this is what they did when they died. The fourth boss, or I guess I should say bosses, are these skeletons who I swear to God, they fucking walk like this Family Guy clip. This boss fight is actually brutal. You have to avoid this fire, and even by walking underneath the fire, it kills you. I want to be mad at this fight, but the background is fucking killing me. These fat little pink demons you come across are actually the most Snow Bros-like enemies probably in the entire game. And the final area is up in space, which surprisingly happened in Snow Bros on Genesis. But I honestly doubt the developers actually knew that when they made this bootleg, because the pictures are like random ass stock photos of satellites and planets. The final boss is honestly kind of a disappointment compared to the first 4 you meet in the game. They're just these 2 boring bird statues. At least the original game had fucking bubble rock. It's technically rock bubbles.
Rewind, go back.
I already messed up one of the names of a character in this video and I had to re-record all of those parts, so just pretend
That was live, Carl.
When you beat the final boss, do the princesses from the original game show up? No! The background just shows a bunch of half-naked women saying, "Thanks, Snow Brothers." Thank them for what? Saving you? I didn't even know you were in the fucking game! What the fuck was the goal of this entire game anyways? What does any of this have to do with the fucking Snow Brothers? Nothing! I can't recommend you trying to play this game, even with all the funny, goofy stuff that's in it. But if you have unlimited continues, then I guess? But keep in mind, the game is way harder than Snow Bros 1, and at that point, it's literally the same game but better, and there's even console ports that are even done better. Well, except for the Game Boy version, probably. I know I technically didn't cover Snow Bros Wonderland or any of the Nick and Tom special games. That's because I wanted to mention the Snow Bros Prime Trilogy, god damn it. But you know what? At least King Atchis makes an actual appearance in these games, and he looks like the king from Clash Royale. Talking about snow for all this time has me remembering something. Sometime last December, I was waiting for my mail. I even waited for him the next morning.
You know what you must do now.
Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it.
Oh yeah, it's July. Fuck!